Hello, Internet, and instead of doing normal StarCraft 2 gameplay commentary or tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and try to talk about the current matchup, which is Zerg versus Terran, because the current notion is that Zerg has a tremendous advantage, that the Zerg is overpowered, and there's a whole bunch of talk on the forums of really, I think, irrational changes to Zerg that would completely break the race in total. Now, I understand where Terran's frustration comes from, and I just want to talk about the queen changes and the current matchup from the Zerg point of view. Now, this is all coming from mediocre player, and I don't think the balance should ever be determined on anyone based on any league or division other than the top tier professionals, because that's really who everyone tries to strive to kind of be like, and I think it's important to know that it's really important that the game is balanced around them. So this is just my opinion on the topics, and try to get an argument going or a discussion going as to what should be done, what could be done to kind of more evenly balance the matchup. Because I do believe Zerg has a little bit too much an advantage right now. I'm going to go ahead and talk about why. But before I talk about the changes directly, I want to talk about what brought about the changes, the actual cause of the queen changes. What really invoked Blizzard to go ahead and give the Zerg what most people deem like a insane buff. Now, I think the first thing to point out is that the Terran opening used to be just double. You get a reactor and you pump out Hellions, and in my opinion, this was too strong, and before you make any rationalizations, just let me explain why. I think it was really strong because the Terran didn't really have to invest all that much. There was no risk in terms of the reward. Now, I'm not just talking about the creep denial, because the creep denial was good for the Terran, and it prevents the Zerg from getting vision early on, and expanding and going ahead and pushing back, early pushes better, wasting more scans for the Terran to try to clear the creep tumors. But there's other reasons too. If the Hellions got behind, if you had like 4 Hellions behind the drone mineral line, and if they just snuck by there or whatever, and they roasted a whole bunch of drones, that could be a potential game-ending scenario for the Zerg. For nothing but a couple hundred mineral investment, it was no really tech deviation. The reactor could be put on the barracks, and it would, or just be stuck on the factory if you go ahead and go mech. So there was really no tech loss. You didn't really commit to anything, and it was really cheap for a scenario that could possibly just end the game right there and then. And it seemed like that was too strong, in my opinion, that just the Terran could end the game just right away. So the other thing is they could kite the queens forever. If you had good micro, the Hellions outranged the queens, and that was rather aggravating to try to deal with too. So I think that's the major reason that brought about the queen change. But I think not only did it affect the Hellions, it also affected everything else that the queens could be used for. In particular, like banshees or drops. And drops, I kind of think is a big one, because now that I came back and I finally got to experience the queen changes myself, I find that I have an easier time, just myself in particular, in dealing with the drops, because the queens, if you have Zerglings blocking off the Marines and such, it used to be that the queens couldn't hit the medevacs, or it seemed like they could hit the medevacs or the Marines without the Marines hitting them back. Now that the queens can kind of outrange them, you could kind of hold the queen could be attacking and hold back the Terran, while the Zerglings would hold back the Marines and Marauders or whatever you're dropping from killing the queen, while the queen took out the medevac. And you can have a couple spine crawlers down or a spore crawler, and it's crazy how easy it is to defend the drops now. And I think that's another aspect that probably Blizzard didn't want to change, but I guess it just ended up changing anyway. So right now it seems like the queen just can be way too versatile. Like right now, I only build these Zerglings to kind of scout and do some damage. I really could just save the minerals and just produce some more drones and just defend purely on Queen Spinecrawler. It's really cost effective, and the Queen, having lots of Queen energy, is really good for late game. Now I'm not really good enough to micro the Queen transfuses, but I'm sure in higher leagues that having a lot of Queens is now really beneficial. They can attack almost all the time without any risk. I guess they can transfuse so many things. In the late game, Zerg is just getting even stronger, and since the Hellion opening is no longer as viable as it was, I still think that it does have some value. It still does really well, and if you do still get behind the drone mineral line, you can still end the game for the Zerg. But it's not as there's more risk going into it now, because you have the potential straight up just to lose more minerals than you actually gain, because you might not even kill any creep tumors. It's hard to say. So that's a factor as well, but it seems to me that the Queen just can do it all right now, and since the Hellion opening is no longer viable, the Zerg can just kind of expand all over the place and get upgrades really fast, and there's not really much the Terran can do about it, because the Terran's answer to these was just a push to the front, which I can easily be scouted now with an increased Overlord speed. You can tell what's going on. You can see the if he has siege tank. If you can make sure you have banelings or mutas or infestors or however you want to change or however you want to deal with it. And I think the infestor also is another thing that came about recently that really has its time to shine right now, and it just crushes in every matchup. It's just infestor, because well, the fungal growth, the snare, it keeps medevacs in place, which let the Queens pummel it from afar. I mean, the infestor does everything now, so if you just get infestor and some upgraded Zerglings, you can hold those pushes no problem. And the other way the Terran prevented Zerg from getting expansion was either the Hellion pushes or going ahead and getting Banshees, which the Queens deal with easily now too. Or drops, and drops seem to be less viable too. I don't have nearly as much time dealing with drops, and I'm definitely way worse now that I've come back, and I still feel like drops are a heck of a lot less threatening. Especially now that I can get infestors, and I don't even need that many Zerglings on defense, because I can just spam out Zerglings. I could get down a couple more hatcheries than I have. I just stockpile gas until the late game and just spam Ultralisks or Broodlords or whatever tech path I choose to go. I prefer Ultralisks just because they're way more mobile, and you could keep on throwing armies at your opponent. Like you'll see in this game, all I have to do is just build Ultralisks and Zerglings and just keep on throwing armies at my opponent, and my opponent just eventually caves. Because they're upgraded, he couldn't do any damage early on. I go ahead and just using infestors and Zerglings, and I don't really need any other tech but infestors and Zerglings, and infestors are good the entire game. Queens seem to be good too the entire game, and yeah, I can see where the Terran frustration is coming from. It's really hard just to stop the Zerg from going places. And I think it takes a lot more micro, a lot more coordination just to prevent what used to be rather simple. The Queen changes, man. It's like, look at these. Look how much Queen energy I have here. If I was a better player, I would just produce tons of Queens and just go Broodlords and just crush the Terran just from transfuses. He wouldn't be able to kill the Broodlords. So anyway, I think what should be done is not as drastic as people are suggesting. I do think the Queen change is way too strong, and it affected I think ZVT the most. It didn't really, I haven't noticed it in my play in particular, or maybe in higher level play it may change a lot too, but it didn't really change all that much for Protoss for me. I still have to rely on roaches, which are a little bit strong, but I've tried playing games where I don't use roaches at all, and I just rely on pure upgraded Zerglings, and I just get crushed every time. I don't think that's a viable way to go at all, so you have to get roaches. I cannot play the Zerg first Protoss matchup without getting roaches. But that's not the topic of this show, of this of this video. So what I think should be done is not as drastic, which people are like suggesting. Oh, revert the queen changes. I think is probably the first thing that should be done. But I think that something still needs to be done about the Hellion opening. If the queen changes go back, the Hellion opening, in my opinion, is still way too strong. There's no risk involved for the Terran, at least not that I can tell. I play Terran a little bit. I don't play nearly as well as I play Zerg, but the Terran opening, geez, the Hellion is just so strong. And if that becomes incredibly viable again, like I remember watching some MLGs and some professional matches where Terran just won by building Hellions. There was no risk involved for him. He expanded and did crazy stuff behind it. It didn't seem like he was investing much at all, and he was perfectly fine with that. He's like, hell, I can build some Hellions. I can take out a couple of drones. I can keep him on the back foot. So I think that's too strong. I don't think Banshees were ever too strong. Now, Banshees are kind of like a cheese, not as much so as Hellions. Hellions seem to be like a viable just tech route, just straight up. So, yeah, I don't think that... I think if the changes do occur where the queen gets nerfed back to where it was before, I think something needs to be changed where that the Hellion can't just crush the Zerg at the beginning of the game anymore, because that was I think that's the real reason Blizzard changed the Queen to begin with, is to try to deal with those Hellion openings. Because boy, it just in every level of play it seemed that the Hellion could just win the game outright, and there was no reason to not do it. Whatever tech route you chose to go in the game, there seemed to be like an unstoppable force. You have to have Zerglings, you have to have Queens, which had that really stupid looking animation where they like flailed their arms out and try to smack the Hellions about, but the Hellions were even faster, and you get Blue Flame, and it would absolutely crush mineral lines for what seemed like almost no risk at all. So, and people are proposing, like, the other thing that people are saying is the Zerg late game is too strong. And I'm not sure that's true. I think it's the Zerg macro right now is too strong. I can take bases, I feel like, too easily. Less risk involved. All I have to do is throw up some spines and some spores, and I pretty much eliminate all types of aggression from in both matchups. Or in all matchups, Zerg vs. Zerg, to Zerg vs. Protoss, and Zerg vs. Terran. It just seems like all I have to do is throw up those static defenses, and I have enough time to go ahead and just react to whatever the hell I need to. And I don't think it's the actual Zerg army that's too strong. I feel like it's how easy it is to replenish. With all this extra minerals and stuff I'm getting in the game, I feel like I can just throw away armies, which is kind of like the Terran thing, where you just throw away Marines and Marines and Marines and Marines. And now that's another thing that changed, is the drop power, and since the drop power decreased, it seems like the power of drops decreased. The drops were another thing that was kind of frustrating to deal with as Zerg, because while it seemed to be kind of like the Hellion, the risk wasn't there at all to begin with. If you dropped down well, you could easily end the game for Zerg if you just stim Marines, and it would be not an investment at all. You just need a medevac and some Marines, and if you just stim and take out an expansion, it's incredibly hard to come back from it, just the time wasted. So you need to take like a couple expansions at a time and just like forfeit one to the Terran and say, okay, well, you took that one, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and take this backup one, make sure I stay alive. Now that that's not even a factor, it seems like what can the Terran do to slow down the Zerg? And I feel like the late game isn't the issue. I feel like it's everything surrounding the late game. just getting to the late game and how not the units in particular, but just how many of them you can get in how short of amount of time. But that's just my take on it, and I would like to hear what other people think, especially from the Terran perspective. If they agree that the Hellion was too strong, or they think the Hellion was just fine, or anything like that. So I'd really like to hear what people have to say about it. But that's me done. If you like this video, please like it. And if you like anything on the channel, please go ahead and subscribe.